Hello, Alamal. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Mona Cottage Books. I'm Selby, and today I'm going to talk about using books to improve your language skills in another language. All right, so I've got a whole bunch of examples of books that you can use to improve your language skills if you're trying to learn a new language. So I have a lot of examples in Dutch because I'm obviously trying to learn Dutch right now, and I'm going to talk about them with you to hopefully inspire you to pick up something to help with your language learning journey. So what I'm going to start with is the simplest books that I can, and those are kids' books. All right, so the absolute simplest book that you're going to find is going to be something like an ABC or a 1, 2, 3 book. These are very, very simple, gives you the letters, and then gives you a word for it. So obviously D is for dinosaur. Whatever language you're trying to learn, this is a way to learn really, really basic vocabulary. Now, is this the best way? Probably not. If you're an adult or a teenager and you're learning another language, you've probably already surpassed this. But hey, if you're starting from scratch and you're teaching yourself and you can grab access to these at like the local library or something, like if you're learning Spanish or French, then they can be totally fun and easy to do. But you probably, maybe you've done a class or two and you need something a little bit more, then you can move up to something like this. These books, some of these are really great because they do have repetition in them and you can do some guessing. That's why I like this book. So it says, green frog, what do you see? Well, I see a purple cat looking at me. And so when you read that and you go, what's a purple cat? Okay, so, and so then you can turn it and be like, oh, that's not the right one. This is a purple cat. Oh, okay, I guessed correctly or I didn't, and go from there. So board books, really simple books. When you're really, really first starting out can be useful and fun, especially if you're going to do it with your kid or something like that. But maybe if you've done a couple classes and you know a little bit more, they might not be as useful. The next step up would be something like this. This is Paddington. This is the one that I'm reading, and it's got a fair bit of text in there. Now, here's a tip of something that I learned a long time ago, actually when I was learning Spanish in high school. If you are trying to read a book and you have to translate or look up the more than 5 words on a page, then the book is probably too difficult for you. So that just gives you a, general, you can decide, you can go through and you can translate every single word on this page if you really have to and want to. But the idea is that you should be able to read most of it, get an idea of what's going on, look at the pictures. That's why picture books are really great, is because you can look at the pictures, you can get an idea, and then kind of like infer what's going on, and then translate or, look up the words. Yeah, bobbling up my words. You can look up the words later and make sure that you've gotten it correct. So that's one thing you can do with kids' books. Something like this, you could also grab a bilingual book. So this is a bilingual book in English and Spanish. And you can see, I like bilingual books a lot, especially if you're like on level 1 or 2 of language learning, because you can read it in whichever language you decide first. So if I was learning Spanish, I would read in Spanish first, see if I understood it, and then move on and read it in English just to kind of like check to make sure that I got it correct. And then you don't have to go and do the translation app and then end up on Facebook and get distracted and not finish it. So bilingual book can be really useful in that regard. So I really like those. Now, you don't have to just stick with picture books and simple kids books. You can also go into nonfiction books. Now, you could try adult nonfiction, but I think children's nonfiction is a good place to start. You can learn a lot of vocabulary from books like these, and they might be more useful than, say, whatever's in Winnie the Pooh or Paddington. You might learn how to say that the cat is fluffy, or cats like to play, and things like that might be more useful. And you know, nowadays they've got some really great nonfiction for kids that can be very entertaining and interesting. But that's another option. So don't just think that you have to go with storybooks. You can actually try and learn maybe some fun facts that will be useful to you in whatever topics that interest you. Now, here is a highly, highly underrated option, I think. In the United States, I feel like we're just now realizing that graphic novels, comics, whatever you want to call them, can be great for language learning, but also for kids learning to read. And the Netherlands has already figured this out, and they have a ton of strips. So here's some footage of my local library, and this is the kids section, where they have just so many options for graphic novels for kids. It's great for not only kids to learn how to read, but it's also great for adults as a language learner. So here's some. So this is one that I am working on reading, and sometimes there's very little text, but sometimes there's some more text. Let's see, like these here. So this is a great way. What I can do is I can look at the picture, I can read the text, I can try and figure out, like infer from what's going on what the text might say, and then I can check and see if I've gotten it right. And now I might go through this whole book and see if I can figure out what's going on without translating anything, or I might go a couple pages, or I could, you know, go through and translate everything that I have trouble with. But either way, it's a great way to not have to sit with, say, you know, an intimidating chunk of text like this. As much as I love reading books, this is pretty intimidating if you're a beginner. And of course, they've got all sorts of different graphic novels nowadays, from adult graphic novels that are not appropriate for children to tons and tons of kids graphic novels. You can pick something that will entertain you and keep you engaged. So I really think that that is a fabulous option if you can source them. My last tip for reading, actually, it's not my last tip. I have another tip. I'll keep that later. My last book reading tip is if you can find bilingual books for adults. This one is actually a conversation book. So what it is that they've written little conversations, something that might happen to you in every day. So this is a healthy eating. So you read this in Dutch, or whatever the language you want is, and then they've got it in English. And so then you can go and see, like, well, did I understand it? Or you can flip back and reference it. And then some of those sayings that, like, if you try to translate them, I don't know if you've ever tried to Google Translate, like, some sayings in one language into yours, and it's like, well, that does not make sense. Something like this would have those weird little sayings that don't make sense properly translated so that they are correct, or that you can understand what they're trying to say. So these are a little bit harder to find. They're not as ubiquitous as just books in the other languages, but they can be really, really useful if you're a bit more advanced and can use some of those. So my last fun little tip about reading to increase your language ability is actually on Instagram or Facebook or something else like that. But this is a trick that I used on Instagram. So I went, when I was trying to learn Dutch, and I followed a bunch of actually gardening, people who did gardening. I was really into gardening at that time. And I followed them on Instagram, and they would post in Dutch, you know, their little stories, or, you know, the little caption. And I would read it and I would try to understand what was going on. And then I would, you hit the little see translation button and then see if I got it right. So that can be a fun way, you know, whatever you're interested in, fashion, books, photography, something, find creators that are doing things in the language that you want to learn. And then you can kind of, you know, just little bits every day. And then you'll start to learn more and more about whatever you're interested in through that lens. And you get to hang out on Instagram and say, I'm learning, it's good. All right, so those are the main options for reading books to help improve your language ability. I hope I've given you some inspiration, something that you want to go out and grab and try. And if you like content like this, if you want to get more tips and tricks and book talky thingies, then like and subscribe, and I will keep going.